everyone, and welcome to Topic Time with Harrison Young in December. Boy, this year has just whipped right by. It's been the most red-letter year for the show that I've ever had, and they just keep getting better and better. And we're going to the lovely Green Mountain state of Vermont. We're not leaving New England for a show tonight. I have an amazing writing teacher up there, and she's an author. We're going to talk to her in a few minutes. I love writing because I've done plenty of it myself. You guys may know that back in the 90s, if I've never mentioned it, I wrote the greatest book of short stories ever, and we're going to talk about what we've done. We're gonna discuss our accomplishments, but of course, before we get to her, got to read these incredible underwriters, and then we will commence per usual. So we got good old Dave's Automotive right up the road here on Route 58 in Hanson. We have a new one, JN Kitchen Design in Marshfield. We have Salon Giovanni in Marshfield. We have New England Floorscapes in Middleborough. We have Rodney's Kitchen in Halifax. We have the Cornerstone Barbershop in Pembroke. We have Kingston Auto Body in Kingston. We have Pembroke Radiator in Pembroke. We have Pals Driving School in Middleborough. You got to check the website for classes in January, February, and April of 2024. They're filling up fast in Middleborough. We got Bulldog Sports Cards. That's Pals Driving School in Middleborough. We got Bulldog Sports Cards in Middleborough. We got the Hanover House of Pizza in Hanover. They make great Sicilian pizza, Greek salads, and have awesome people working there, and they deliver. We have Tom Auto in Middleborough. We have the Gunrunner LLC, the Second Amendment Freedom Store in Middleborough. We have DNS Auto Works and Collision Specialists in Abington, also right up the road here on Route 58. And we have the Auto Shop in Hanover. Thanks, Ed Rooney. And now I'm going to introduce Joni. She's a writing professor and an author. Is that correct?
That, among other things, you got it. Yes, Harrison.
Okay. First of all, where do you teach writing? Is it high school, college?
No. I teach it all over the world now because I had my own writing studio in White River Junction, Vermont. And so I had classes all the time there. Then COVID hit. So I had to go online. And honestly, the classes took off because now they're available online. And so they're small group classes, 6 people or so. And, we really get to it. So we have a blast. I've been teaching for 20-some years, but now I teach all over the place in person as well, but mostly online through my own writing center.
I'm considering taking your class.
Yeah.
I think everybody I've taken. Well, here's the thing. Now I mentioned that book of short stories I wrote. I'm just going to brag a little bit, and then we're going to talk about you because you're the one I'm interviewing. But this is kind of an interesting story, kind of an epic tale of how a great book got created and how the author didn't even think it was going to happen until years after we started it. So I've always loved reading. My parents, they're in their 80s. They're kind of on the wane, but they're doing as good as they can. But they've always had a big, library in the house, and they've always encouraged me to read. I've always loved short stories because you can read them in, one sitting, and oftentimes if they're done well, they can really move you. And I like being able to read something in one sitting. So back in the early 90s, I mean, long before that, I was writing stuff, poetry, mostly just fiction and stuff, using my imagination. And then in the 90s, I took a short story, 1989, I took a writing course at Bridgewater State University in Bridgewater, Mass. The gentleman that taught it had his own printing press at the school. He's a short story writer named Mike Hurley. He's probably retired by now. He's 20 years older than me. I'm 64, so he's like 84. And it was an interesting course, but when you take a creative writing course, you can find out how creative you can be and how creative other people can be. And it's a very fulfilling and amazing interaction, I think. So I took his course. Then in 1990, I went up to Vermont at the Bennington College campus. They were having a creative writing seminar I took for 2 weeks. It was interesting. We had people from all over the world. And I got to tell you, I actually had more fun with Hurley's class in 1989 than I did at the Bennington Writers Workshop because I felt that there were too many people that were way more creative than me at Bennington, including the guy that taught the course. But then I started just writing in my, I'd been writing for years, and then I started writing stuff that my father was a good critic of my work, and he suddenly, after a while, I don't want to say suddenly, it took years for him to start thinking, hey, your work's getting more interesting. So finally, in the 90s, as the early 90s progressed into the late 90s, I started, creating enough words. And the guy Mike Hurley, who taught the class in 1989, told us that the quantity of a book should be 50,000 words in order to be novel length. So what I realized was as the 90s progressed, I realized I had 50,000 words worth of stuff in short stories. And damn, I said, I can do a book. I can turn this into a book. Finally, 10 years after I had a course, I sent the manuscript around the world. didn't get anything. But I went back to his office in the school, and I said, "Hey, can you publish my book? You got your own printing press." And he did. Of course, I had to pay for it, but I did very well, and I sold copies. I got a little TV news coverage in 2002, and to this day, I mean, I give the book away now, but I still say it's the greatest book of short stories ever written. They're totally off the wall. I felt so accomplished when I did it, and I never thought when I started that I would have enough material to finish it as a book. So like our lives, it evolved, and then eventually I look back and I said, I can't believe I did this. So now that I've done that, gotten that out of the way, let's talk about your writing and what your type of writing is. So go ahead, just explain that if you will. Sum it up, please.
As a writer, I love to talk about my writing, but I do want to say congrats to you. And you kind of summed up the trajectory of being a writer. You don't kind of think you can do it. You got to take classes. You got to put it out there. You got to be in workshops. You got to hear what people have to say, and you got to persevere. And the next thing you know, oh my God, 50,000 words. And it does almost take you by surprise because you build it one story at a time, and then you find a way to get it out there. So I love that trajectory. Congrats on that. And then also that satisfaction you described about when it's out there, it really feels good. So well done. And really congrats. So, and so I'm like you, I like the short form. Usually I have 2 books out for writers for sure. And I'm really proud of them. But also my new book is a collection of essays, and they're kind of put in the literary humor essays because I didn't start out to write a comic. They're not necessarily humor writing, but much of the feedback, the reviews, on Amazon speak to the humor in it. So they're kind of in that humor literary category. And
all right, hold on. I got a question right off the bat. Are they essays about real life, or are they? I mean, I assume that. All right, what can you give me a little synopsis of the themes of the essays by and large? Just not too much away.
Yeah. I have a weirdo collection because very often an essay collection, they're kind of hard to sell in market. So I was really lucky and grateful to get a publisher, but they often will have a singular theme. Like they'll all be about they'll all be about overcoming something or grief or aging or parenthood. And I just don't have that kind of attention span. So one is in the form of, a letter I wrote to the real life inspiration for Dracula. But the essay itself is kind of about me exploring the origins of cruelty, because way back when he was just a terrible person. And, sometimes we see things in contemporary times and among leaders. So, one is about nothing more than buying my ex-husband an oven. But on the other hand, it's about how to rebuild a broken relationship and restore a family. One is about, micro expressions in rodents, and about sort of how the world and I specifically need a break often from just the headlines. And I don't want my animals to have micro expressions. I want to just assume they're all happy. One is called The Real Reasons Writers Hate Amazon. So it's a list of fake Amazon reviews of my own book that hadn't been published yet. But they kind of get to the life of an author and how sometimes you get the most dingbatty reviews on Amazon. So they're really all over the place. But if there's any one theme that I discovered very late in the game underneath them all, it's kind of about, it's going to sound cliche, but every theme sounds cliched by the time you have to encapsulate it in a sentence or two. But it's kind of about making the most of your time here, because it goes by all too fast. Yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't write towards that theme, but I discovered there was a little bit of that in many of the essays. So if there's one underarching theme, which again is why it took me by surprise when so many people think this book is really funny, because it's about a lot of difficult subjects sometimes, but life is funny.
It is funny. It's funny. I mean, it sounds to me like you have a taste for dark humor too. Like you could take a dark situation and turn it, and create a light mode out of it somehow, even though, without sugarcoating it too much. Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. I think of it more now that I've been confronted with this label or these reactions to the book. I've been paying more attention to why do people think these are often funny. And I think dark humor is a part of it, but it's almost more observational humor. And when you're really observant of how people act and think across situations, humanity is kind of interesting and odd and quirky and often laugh out loud funny, even in dark situations. So I would call it observational humor, getting people right. And that includes the stuff that goes on between my own ears. That's often, not always appropriate or whatever, but there's a lot of humor out there, even as we're feeling grief or loss or in a difficult situation.
Absolutely. And I think to be honest with you, in my opinion, the most guffawing type of humor for me is the most inappropriate stuff. I love inappropriate stuff. I'm into that big time. But of course, you have to be, you kind of have to be careful who I mean, you don't want to offend the wrong people, but you don't mind offending the right people. I guess that's basically what it's all about. And I guess you just have to look, you just have to kind of do your research and figure out, okay, who can I offend and have it be to my advantage, and who can I offend and have it not be to my advantage, and then you gotta take it from there. So tell me about yourself. Tell me about where you grew up and how you got and how long have you been writing for, and tell me about your education, if you would, please.
I sure will. I do have to say, in response to what you just said, given the response to my book and all, one thing that I'm doing much more recently is sort of having that conscious moment where I'm like, maybe I won't say that out loud, kind of thing.
I understand.
So it's funny. I
think writing is like you're at a Ouija board. You feel like you're being guided by something above and beyond your actual conscious, which is absolutely right.
Very much so. Yeah, and I feel a lot more confident about the humor in the book, because at that point, when it's out in a book, I've revised that thing a million times, and if I'm saying something in a book, I don't necessarily care what comes at me, because I've thought it through and it's saying it exactly the way I want to say it versus what comes out of my mouth sometimes. But so, humor is, I think, just a really interesting topic for any writer, you, me, and it does not, only land in the humor genre. I think it benefits almost any narrative to get people right. There's going to be some humor to get
absolutely
right, whether it's a thriller or a police procedural or whatever. So it's a cool topic. It's a cool narrative device for writers, and it's a neat thing to I think really empower a lot of your stories, regardless of what the topic is. So it's a neat topic. But I live in Vermont. You already mentioned that, and
did you grow up there?
No, I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Okay, Amish country.
Yeah, exactly. So then, but all over the place after that. Went to Philly after that, and then to Minneapolis, and then here, and was born in the Midwest. So, got a little taste, except for the West Coast, a little taste of everything. And it's kind of funny.
So much. What did you want to find that you finally found in Vermont?
Yeah, well, a lot of it wasn't me traveling. I was me trailing. So I mean, when I went to Philly, I knew I wanted a city after college, and that was the obvious city, because Lancaster, Philadelphia, 70 minutes away.
Where did you go to college?
I went to a little university in Western Pennsylvania, Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And never heard of it. Yeah, it's tiny. Well, I don't know how tiny it is, but it was the right school for me. It was the school back in the day. Like, it's funny, that's the only school I applied to. They probably had 90% acceptance rate. Now with my kids, both of them young adults, I remember the college application process, so many schools. Look at it. But none of that. I just applied to one school because of the location. A lot of my friends were going. But after that, then I wound up in Philly. That was by choice. And then after that, I got married, and he ended up moving to Minneapolis. So I went out there, which I really liked, but it was freezing. And then he ended
Vermont isn't exactly a heat pit either, especially at this time of year. You have snow now, don't you?
We have well, certainly some parts of it, absolutely. We had testing, but it's so funny because you're right. I would have thought Vermont was like, oh my God, freezing. But when you've lived in Minneapolis for a couple years,
Vermont's milder than Minneapolis, I guess. Okay.
Well, back when we moved here, which was a good 20 some years ago, it was dramatically colder in Minnesota during the winters, and maybe still is. But so then I was lucky, because wherever I ended up really, really liking. I love Minneapolis, but I don't regret moving, even though I had a bunch of good friends there. And that's where I really started to learn how to write and creative writing. It's a very creative community, but that cold was too much. And then I kind of settled into Vermont, and at first thought, whoa, no. And we hadn't planned on staying, but then my ex got a job here. And I actually, probably one of the best accidents that ever happened to me to live here. I
always say everything happens for a reason. That's why I ask these questions.
Yeah, it's weird, and I wouldn't have had the life I have right now. And that's an obvious statement in some degrees, but the the point beneath that, beyond the obvious, was I'm not very good at holding a job, a real job. I've worked at jobs forever, but mostly not longer than 2 years, or I would get bored or whatever. And so being in a smaller community, it was much smaller even when we moved here. But it's a very highly educated community because we're right by Dartmouth
I know
College.
you got there's a lot of great, right? I think Vermont, that part of the country you're in, has a very good taste for writers, because there's a lot of nice bookstores up there.
Exactly.
Those little small towns, people go there and they have writers conventions and right. I mean, I know that, like the one at Bennington.
You mentioned Bennington, yeah.
Right.
You mentioned Bennington, yeah.
1990.
Yeah, okay. But it kind of allowed me to, you know what, I'm going to start my own writers center, because as much as there are so many writers here, or colleges, or those big highfalutin programs, which I often will teach at, once in a while, but for just the average adult who wants to learn creative writing, and I love what you said at the very beginning of our chat, it's just something everyone should try. They might discover they want to be a writer. They might already be a writer. They might just then expand their creativity. So I knew I wanted to teach adults in a community. I didn't have to be under the auspices of getting a degree at all. And so, if you build it, they will come. And I built this little writer center, both a physical space at the time, and now it's a virtual space. And I've done workshops for, I'm not exaggerating, thousands of writers, and now they're across the country because of Zoom. Sweet. But it was definitely my calling. I might never have done it if there'd been jobs that I could have more easily, been channeled into. But here I kind of wanted and could make my own way.
That's it. Right now you're happy with what you're doing. Do you have any writers that inspire you I mean, for instance, when I was, there's a writer named Tobias Wolff. Do you know who he is? Not to be confused with, yeah. Okay. The Tom Wolfe, not the different Wolf. But in 1997, I started, when the book was really starting to flourish. That was the big year for the stories. I really just took off in 97. And that's basically when the manuscript was finished. But like I said, I didn't get it published till 1999 because I sent it around the world and nobody published it until I found Hurley. And then he realized he could do it for other people too. But I started seeing his style was so off-center that I said, hey, you know what? I could write stuff like I sort of just copied his style. Now I was always a fan of Kurt Vonnegut too. I even wrote him a letter back in 1979. When I was a teenager. I was 19 and a half. He never answered it. He was living on Cape Cod. So what I want to know is, tell me some writers that have inspired you, if there are any.
Yeah, well, I love to read, and I mean, one of the most obvious ones, just because of the genre I write in, is David Sedaris. I mean, his humor and the way he crafts a story, they're always scenic. They're obviously very funny, but particularly his later work, again, they're stories with real heartbeats. They're not just laugh a minute. They're not like Dave Barry, whom I like, but he writes purely comedy. He's writing. I know Dave Barry is, yeah. Yeah, but David Sedaris writes a great story, but he has that observational humor that makes them often very hilarious. Plus, he's real honest in his writing. So he's one. You probably won't know this writer, but she's actually got a couple of really big books out. Julie Schumacher. I know the name. Yeah, Dear Committee Members. I think it won the Thurber Prize for humor and literature. And oh my God, it was all in the form of this professor having to write recommendation letters for his students. So it's a comic novel, but oh my God, it's so good. I love the guy that wrote, won the Pulitzer, Andrew Sean Greer, I think is his name. And that won the Pulitzer a couple years ago. Now he has a second follow-up about the book. It's a funny name. Les is the name of the main character, but man, I love his writing. I could go on, and I love murder mystery. I read a lot of, I don't read too many.
Patricia Cornwell, right?
Patricia Cornwell?
Patricia Cornwell?
Oh, yeah. I haven't read her in a while, but oh, yeah, I used to love her. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Then it got a little gritty for a while. I needed a break, but no, she's fantastic. Yeah. So, yeah, I read really pretty widely, but other than I don't read the romance genre very much, and I don't read.
The chick books, not really for you. I get it.
Yeah, I admire them because, there's a way you got to write them. And they're escapist and they're fun and they can often be really smart for sure. And it's also the most popular genre. But for whatever reason, they're not quite my thing. But again, sometimes you sit out and think, you set out and think, what, I'm going to really write an easy book to write. I'll write a romance or one of those lighter books. They're not easy to write. And
no, nothing's easy to write. You got to, I admire
you're going to
make an effort for it. Are you familiar with, are you familiar with Glimmer Train? It's a publication of short stories which comes out quarterly. I haven't seen, my mother used to subscribe to it for me. I haven't gotten it in years, but it's the two women that run it are very, very astute, and they're really very fussy about the stories they pick out. And I sent them one story, and they actually sent me a letter back saying we considered using it, but they never did. But have you heard of Glimmer Train?
That's a high bar. That's a real high bar. Well, like so many fates of literary magazines, particularly in the last 8-10 years, that one went under. But yeah, it was started by two sisters. Yeah, it's definitely went under. And
I didn't know that. Wow, that's what you get for not publishing my stuff. Sorry to say that. I know.
Yeah. Wow. But even to get a response from a literary magazine like that, that's a big deal, because they really were one of the top echelon literary journals. So
they were. Yeah, I always enjoyed the Atlantic Monthly. They always have great short stories too.
Yeah, they do. Sure. So
tell me about the book that you held up at the beginning. Let's talk about that. The pink one.
I'll hold it up again.
Hold it up again.
Party. Oh, it's probably backwards on the screen, but it's called Party Like It's 2044.
I can see it says 2044. So is that science fiction? Because it's in 21 years.
No, it's the title essay as well as the title of the book. I don't want to give too much away, of course.
Don't give too much away.
But it's got to do with, actually, the essay is about my birthday, and now I'm trying so hard. I love my birthday. I love birthdays, to celebrate it and just get inundated with the usual that happens when you have birthdays and you're of a certain age. You get all these cards about your impending doom and death. And so, it's like really was getting hard to celebrate my birthday. And one of my really good friends actually not only sent me a card that was sort of doomsday, but also sent me
cards. Like, you're getting doomsday cards from your friends? That's the stock humor, right?
Yeah, but it's true. I mean, good luck getting a birthday card that just says, "Hey, let's have a great time," or what. I'm not talking about just funny. I'm talking about funny cards that they're all reference. Oh, you're almost expired, and there's a traffic or a parking meter on top of it, or those dark cards. So anyway, the title references not only a friend who gave me a card with that kind of vibe to it, but he'd actually gone out and done my actuarial table, which, insurance companies use to predict the date of your death. So that is a reference to, and that's the kind of thing where, like, who does that, but that is the central essay in terms of the theme too, because it really does embody the theme of, my God, we while we're alive, like, we're almost forbidden or discouraged from celebrating our life. But isn't it ironic, once we die, all the events are about the celebration of the life of. So we celebrate our death after we're gone, but while we're trying to just live it, people are trying to bring you down,
That's true.
So I'm very proud of that essay. It's really good. It's also really funny, but there's that deeper message there. Like, come on, people, if you're alive, and celebrate. If it's your birthday, my God, enjoy it in whatever capacity you can. Why all this about aging or whatever? Good luck. It's better than the alternative, as the cliche goes.
Well, right. I suppose it is. I like to think, like I said, I mean, my parents are in the high 80s now, and they can't walk well, and their attitude is still very good considering. But I have to be prepared for what's coming soon. I figure this is the way it is. I hope I'm wrong, but they're 88 and 87. So, I mean, and at my age, I'm still lucky to have them both. But it's tough to watch them as long as you're on the subject, it's tough to watch them get old right now. I just went to the house on Thanksgiving, and they were just limping around, and they're thinking of doing assisted living now. But
I got a lot of friends.
I'm glad they live long enough to see what I've done. At least that's important. I always hope that I can impress them at least, before the next phase, whatever it is. But okay, well, that's definitely a twist, a new twist that I'm not familiar with, but I like it, I guess, because it gets you thinking, which is what you try to do when you write anything.
Why are you wasting your time when you're alive, bemoaning that you're getting older? Why not just celebrate?
I'm happy getting older, but now that I'm seeing what my parents are going through, I can't say I'm looking forward to 20 years from now, although, I'm going to do what you can. I know you got to make the most of it. I totally get that. And on that note, I think we're down to the final 5 minutes of the show. So I hope you had fun talking to me.
Talking to you, and also nice to meet you, and congrats on that book you wrote.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. Hard to believe it's over. I always say that book is my final great accomplishment of the 20th century because it coincided with the end of the century. It came out on Wednesday, December 22nd of 1999. So, and that was just before Y2K and all that stuff and the change of the millennium. And it took me, and I was 40 when that happened. So everything sort of in my life sort of happens. I like to look at life as in timelines, like everything I've accomplished sort of happens in a decade, including my birth at the end of one decade and the beginning of another. I was born in 1959, so that was the end of the 50s. And now, and then everything I've done, Topic Time, I started in 2010. That was the beginning of the 2010s, and everything. And the book was in the 90s, and that was in the, you know what I'm saying? So my college was in the 80s. All right. Well, what I want you to do now that we're in the final 5 minutes is give shouts out to people that are going to see the show. Just, friends and stuff. And then we'll wrap it up with my music and the way we began it. So go ahead.
Well, first shout out is a general shout out to all the people who have the courage to take a writing workshop. So that's
I would recommend it to anybody.
Yep. And that is really anybody. It's just a good thing to do. No judgment. You might pick up a little bit of craft and you'll certainly tap into your creativity. Shout out to my partner, Helmut Baer, who did the comics. This book has 5 cartoons in it too. He's a cartoonist. So kind of thematically, there's some cartoons in it or illustrations. So shout out to him. He also did the comics in my 2 writing guides. So let's see. And then shout out to everyone to have a great holiday season in whatever form you celebrate it. Let's make the most of it and not bemoan the holidays or the busyness of the holidays or whatever. Let's celebrate. So
I agree with you.
Whatever way we can.
All right. Well, listen, if you had fun with me, any of those people that you mentioned, everything. Jeffrey Haas gets me a lot of interviews. If you think any of those people would be good guests for me, tell Jeffrey and have him set us up so we can do it. We can either do it by Zoom or in person.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any?
Happy to pass it on.
Before we wrap the show up, do you have anything coming up, in the near future that you might want to mention that might be important? If not, that's fine. But I always ask every guest that before I wrap the show up.
Yeah. No, I'm still really working on promoting this book. It's brand new. It's only like a month or 2 old. And so if anybody does pick up Party Like It's 2044, I love to hear from readers, their feedback, and, be part of book groups or book clubs. So that's my main gig. And I've always got writing workshops happening online, so they can look my author website up and find me through there. But I love if people pick up the book, they share it or, give me a shout out.
Okay. Are you on Facebook?
I'm on Facebook. I have an author website. So yeah,
well, the reason I asked
my name.
Okay, because that's Joni Beth Cole, right?
Yeah, my author website is Joni B. Cole.
Okay, got it.
.com. So yeah.
So what I want to do is connect with you on Facebook, because when the show is done, when it's edited, I can send it to you, and then you can share it with as many people as you want.
I'll share.
Share alike. All right. No, I have one last favor to ask. Once we wrap the show up, would you stick around and let my tech guy take a pic for my Facebook page? And then now, is your Facebook name Joni Beth Cole?
Yeah, or just Joni Cole. I'm sorry, I don't really remember, but yeah, it's under.
Okay, I'll see if I can find you. You can send me a friend request and I can tag you. All right. Are you okay doing a picture for that? And I want to make sure that your graphics are the way you want them to. I'll go over that as soon as we wrap the show up. Are you okay? So you okay doing a pic? Okay. All right. So folks, thanks for watching Topic Time in December. More great shows coming on in the next few weeks, and see you next time. Take care. Wrapping up and rolling out. There you go.